In this video, I will show you how to wire an Aguilar OBP-2 preamp. This particular preamp is going to go into a P-bass, so that is 2-knob configuration, a volume, and a bass treble stack. The first thing you want to do is take your preamp and you want to strip off about 1/8 of an inch of insulation from all of the wires, except for the black and red wire, which you want to strip off about 1/2 an inch of insulation. I have the 2 pots and the jack in front of me, just using a piece of cardboard that's clamped inside of a vise for a little better view. And I have my preamp module, which I have stripped the insulation from the end of the wires, and then I have wrapped together the 3 wires for the bass and the 3 wires for the treble control. And because in this particular configuration I'm using a stacked bass and treble, I can wire all of those basically together, which is going to give a really clean look for the final installation. And before I can get started wiring, I just need to tin all of the contacts, which would mean the 3 lugs on a standard pot, or all 6 lugs on a stacked pot like this, and then the 3 lugs on a jack. And basically you just need to touch your soldering iron to the lug just for a few seconds, and then you can touch the solder to the lug and the solder will melt. You do not want to simply touch the solder to the iron. You want the lug itself to be melting the solder. And it just takes just a few seconds to do each individual one. And I have already done it for the volume and for the jack. And you will also want to do this for the end of each individual wire, just a small amount of solder on each one. It's going to give you a much better connection when you go to wire it. Now we can focus on wiring the treble control first. And all of our preamps come with wire instructions. And I know for the treble control, it goes white, yellow, purple, white for all Aguilars. And I'm going to do that to the 3 lugs that are closest to me on the stacked bass and treble pot. And that's going to make the very top knob control the treble. And then after that, I'm going to do the 3 lugs that are furthest away from me for the bass, which is going to make the bottom knob of the stack control the bass. And now that all the wires are tinned and the lugs on the pot are tinned, we don't need to add any more solder. We simply need to touch our iron and then that is it. Push the wire through, let the solder cool, and you should really only be heating up that solder just for a few seconds. A lot of people are a little bit scared about doing this, thinking they're going to be destroying these components, but it's very easy to solder 2 pots. They are pretty heat resistant, unlike finer circuit boards or anything like that. And then for the bass, the colors just go brown, gray, purple. And you just want to hold the wire there as the solder cools, just for a few seconds. And then finally the purple. And then your bass treble stack is completely wired. We can now focus on the volume pot. The leftmost lug is going to be for the ground. I take a black wire that is long enough to go from the volume pot to the jack, and I strip off about 3/4 of an inch of insulation, and I tin the tip of that, and I have also tinned all 3 lugs on the volume pot. So I will simply solder the black wire now to that leftmost lug, and then just press the exposed wire to the side of the pot casing, and then actually solder that wire to the side of the pot. And the middle lug is going to connect to the hot lead from your pickup. I'm just going to solder a black wire to that middle lug, which has some of the insulation stripped off the end, and now a customer will be able to solder their pickup lead to that wire instead of soldering directly to the middle lug of that pot. And then I just have to connect the blue wire from my preamp to the rightmost lug, and your volume pot is wired up. It's a little more complex when you have two volumes or you have a volume and a blend for any two pickup scenarios, but all the basic soldering principles are going to be exactly the same. And now we can focus on wiring the jack. And the first step in that, you first want to take your 9-volt battery clip, which has both a black and a red lead on it. You'll want to connect the red lead to the red wire that is coming from your preamp. You want a nice solid mechanical connection there, and then you want to solder that mechanical connection, and then you can slide a piece of shrink tubing over that just to protect the connection, make sure nothing shorts out. And then you can take the black lead coming from that battery clip, and you want to put a wider piece of heat shrink tubing over that. Take your soldering iron and then go to the lug that is directly across from the shorter of the two prongs. And then your battery is all wired up. You can then slide the heat shrink tubing over that connection. And then you could look at the middle lug on the jack, which does not connect to either of the prongs. That is for the ground. And I take the black wire that is coming from your volume pot and the black wire coming from the preamp, and I attach that to a small piece of black wire, just a few inches, that I have trimmed the insulation off the end. And this is for connecting to your bridge ground during installation, just to make sure your entire system is going to be connected to your bridge and then to your strings, which prevents any humming. So you can solder all the grounds to that one lug, and then again use a piece of shrink tubing over that connection. And then you have one more lug, which is for the green wire on the Aguilar. Again, use a piece of shrink tubing over that before I solder to that final lug. And I can push that tubing over there. And then all the wiring is complete. I will first bench test this to make sure everything is working properly, and then I will go back and just touch my soldering iron or use a heat gun to all of the heat shrink tubing, which will cover all of your joints very nicely. Make sure you're not going to get any short circuiting or anything like that. And then you are all set. Your Aguilar is fully pre-wired and ready to install in your base. I'm going to send this unit to Max, and then he is going to show you how to wire it up to your base when you receive it in the mail from us already pre-wired. Here is the preamp fully pre-wired. In order to install this in your bass, you need to simply connect the hot lead from your pickup to the wire coming from the volume pot, and then the ground wire from your pickup can go to the back of the volume pot, and then the wire coming from your bridge needs to connect to the wire going to your jack. And then you simply need to plug a 9-volt battery into the battery clip, and then installation in your bass is complete.